Welcome to our deep dive today. We're going to be looking at valuing changes in construction contracts.
Oh, really interesting stuff.
Yeah, and to help us, we're going to be using a guide. It's from the Royal Institution of Chartered Surveyors.
RICS.
Right.
You got it.
The global standards, folks.
Yeah, exactly. And the guide is called Valuing Change.
Okay.
And I'll be honest, it is a little bit of a dense read.
It is.
But we're going to break it all down.
Yeah.
We'll try to give you all the juicy bits and takeaways, so you don't have to wade through all the jargon.
And I think what we're going to find is that even small changes
Oh, yeah.
could have a big impact on cost.
Yeah.
And we're not just talking about like swapping out a doorknob.
Right.
We're talking like design alterations.
Yeah.
Unexpected ground conditions.
I've heard stories about those.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Shifting material costs.
So many things.
Yeah.
You name it.
Okay, so let's say I'm a project manager and the client suddenly decides, you know what? Instead of these glass walls,
Yeah.
I want brick. How does the contract help me figure out how much more that's going to cost?
Well, that's where the principles of valuing change come in.
Okay.
And most contracts, despite, their variations, rely on a few kind of key ideas. So if the change involves work that's similar to what's already in the contract,
Okay.
you would just use existing rates.
So like if we had brick somewhere else,
Exactly.
we'd use that price.
Yeah.
Okay.
But if it's something totally new,
Okay.
then you have to establish what's called fair rates,
Got it.
which are based on market prices. And you've got to factor in everything. Labor materials, everything.
So it's really detective work,
Yeah.
comparing apples to apples.
Yeah.
Or bricks to bricks in this case.
Exactly.
But what if it's not so easy to quantify the work up front,
Yeah.
like emergency repairs? Or
Right.
those little last-minute additions.
Oh, yeah, you always get those.
Oh, yeah, those always happen.
Yeah, those curveballs.
Okay, so
Yeah.
how do you deal with those?
Well, that's where day work comes into play.
Right.
And that's all about valuing variations based on the actual time and resources that get used.
I see.
So you're tracking, labor
Yeah.
materials,
Yeah.
every hour spent on that variation,
Okay.
and that forms the basis of your valuation.
So you're really tracking everything in detail.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm starting to see the big picture here.
Uh-huh.
But I think the question is, how do these principles actually play out
Yeah.
in different contract types?
Right.
Because they're not all created equal, right?
You're absolutely right. And that's why we're going to break down some common UK contracts
Okay.
to see how each one tackles this whole change valuation puzzle. So first up, we've got the JCT standard building contract.
Okay. The
Yeah.
classic,
Yeah, the classic.
the go-to, like the tried and true.
Yeah,
Now, I've heard that this contract comes in different flavors.
it does.
Something about contracts with and without quantities.
Exactly. So you've got contracts without quantities, you've got contracts with quantities.
Okay.
And then you even got some with approximate quantities.
Okay, so let's break that down.
Right.
What's a contract without quantities?
Okay, so it sounds a bit counterintuitive, but contracts without quantities.
Yeah.
They're used for projects where it's really tough to nail down those precise quantities at the outset.
So you're telling me there are projects where they just start building and they just figure it out as they go?
Well, not exactly. There's still planning involved,
Right.
but the full scope might only become clear as the project progresses. Think of like a complex renovation.
Okay.
You might uncover hidden surprises.
Yeah, you don't know what's behind those walls.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
And in these cases, the contractor takes on more risk
I see.
because they're responsible for estimating the quantities.
So if things change,
Yeah,
they could be on the hook for a lot more money.
exactly. And that's why valuing variations in these contracts often involves a lot of negotiation.
Yeah.
And you're really trying to figure out those fair rates for any extra work.
Yeah.
Okay, now contracts with quantities.
Right.
They're more common for projects where the scope is really well defined from the get-go.
Okay.
So you're talking about those detailed bills of quantities.
Those are the ones with every nut and bolt lifted out.
Exactly. Every nut and bolt.
Wow.
And that makes valuing variations much clearer because if there's a change, you basically just remeasure the actual work done
Okay.
and adjust the payment accordingly.
Seems pretty straightforward.
Yeah.
But I have a feeling that there's always a but.
Oh, there often is.
When it comes to construction contracts,
Yeah.
what's the but?
So one interesting wrinkle is something called the contractor's designed portion.
Okay, what is that?
So this applies when the contractor is actually responsible for designing part of the project,
Oh,
not just building it.
so they're wearing two hats.
Exactly. They're the designer and the builder.
How does that impact valuation then?
Well, variations within that design portion can get really tricky because you're not just assessing construction costs. Yeah.
You're also looking at the impact of the design changes.
I see.
So imagine a contractor designed facade detail changes that could ripple through material choices, structural calculations.
Oh, wow.
Even the timeline. So it's a whole different ballgame in terms of valuation.
So those seemingly small details can have big consequences.
Absolutely.
So we've covered the classic JCT contracts.
Right.
And we've looked at the variations.
Right.
What's next on our contract tour?
Okay, let's move on to the JCT design and build contract.
Okay.
This one flips the script a bit.
Great.
Here, the contractor takes on both the design and the construction.
Okay.
Often for a fixed lump sum price.
So it's like a one-stop shop.
Yeah. One-stop shop.
For the client. They hand over the vision.
Yep.
Contractor takes care of everything.
Exactly.
But how do you even deal with changes when you've got a fixed price?
Right.
Doesn't that make things a bit rigid?
It does add a layer of complexity.
Okay.
So variations are typically valued based on the contractor's actual costs.
Okay. Plus a reasonable markup for their profit.
Okay.
So it's this intricate dance of balancing the original agreement with the reality of changes.
Which always happens.
Which always happen.
So I bet those negotiations can get interesting.
Oh, yeah.
Now, what about when you have like those mega projects?
Yeah.
Like those huge, complex projects you hear about.
Right.
Do they use like a special JCT design and build contract?
Well, you're right. Those mega projects have their own beast of a contract.
Yeah.
It's called the major project contract.
Got it.
And it's specifically designed to handle the scale and complexity of these huge undertakings.
Okay.
So it's got more robust mechanisms for managing change and risk.
So we've got the traditional JCT contracts. We've got the design and build versions.
Mm-hmm.
I'm ready to explore some different approaches.
All right.
What else is out there?
Okay, let's shift gears to NEC contracts.
Right.
These are kind of the new kid on the block. They're known for being a bit more collaborative.
Okay.
So these contracts, they use something called compensation events to trigger the valuing of changes.
Compensation event sounds very legal.
It does.
What does that even mean?
Well, it's all about being upfront
Yeah.
and transparent about what can trigger a change and a cost adjustment.
Got it.
So these events can cover a huge range of situations.
Yeah.
From like unexpected ground conditions.
We talked about those.
Yeah. To client-requested changes.
Okay.
It's a way to kind of preemptively address
Right.
the potential for change.
I like that. So less finger pointing, more problem solving.
Yeah.
But I'm sure there's a catch.
Well, there are always nuances.
Of course.
NEC contracts actually come in a bunch of different options.
Okay.
A, B, C, D, E, and F.
Wow, that's a lot of options.
It is.
What are the key differences?
Okay, so options A, B, C, and D
Yeah.
are all about either an activity schedule or bills of quantities.
Right.
That's the basis for how they kind of quantify and value those changes. Options E and F, on the other hand, they are cost reimbursable.
Okay.
So the contractor gets paid for their actual costs plus a fee.
So knowing which option is in play is really important.
Absolutely.
To understand how those change orders are going to be handled.
Exactly.
So ready to dive in a little deeper?
Absolutely. Let's go beyond just knowing and get into the real-world scenarios where those contract clauses come to life.
Let's do it. All right, so we've toured the contract landscape. From JCT to NEC.
Right.
It's pretty clear that valuing changes isn't a one-size-fits-all kind of situation.
Exactly. And now let's kind of like put on our hard hats and step onto the construction site. Okay, so let's say we're working on a project using that classic JCT standard building contract with quantities. So we've got our bill of quantities, everything's neatly outlined, and then bam, we hit a snag.
Oh.
The ground conditions.
I've heard stories about those.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
They're way different than what we anticipated.
Okay.
So instead of nice soft soil, we hit bedrock.
So suddenly that simple excavation turns into a huge headache.
It does. You're talking potential delays, extra excavation work. Maybe you even need to bring in specialized equipment.
So we're not just, adjusting a few numbers in a spreadsheet. This could actually throw off the whole project.
Yeah, the whole timeline, budget.
Yeah.
And that's where the contract comes in.
Okay.
We need to assess the impact of this change in conditions.
Okay.
Determine the extra costs.
And how do we do that?
Well, remember those fair rates we talked about?
Yeah.
This is where they come in.
Okay.
We need to document everything meticulously.
It's like every hour of extra labor.
Yeah. every extra bit of material.
If you need more equipment.
Exactly. The whole shebang.
So those detailed records are really important.
Right, yeah.
Not just for, getting paid fairly, but also to avoid disputes down the line.
Absolutely. Documentation is key in construction.
Yeah.
Especially when you're dealing with these changes.
Okay, so imagine a different scenario.
Right.
We're working on a project. We've got a JCT design and build contract.
Okay.
And the client decides, you know what? I don't want that roofing material. I want this one.
Oh, I can see how that could throw a wrench in the works.
Yeah.
Especially since the contractor is responsible for both the design and the construction.
Yeah, they're wearing those two hats.
Yeah.
So it's not just about swapping out materials.
Yeah.
You might need to adjust the whole design.
Absolutely. You got to go back to the drawing board.
Yeah.
Reassess structural calculations, maybe even adjust the timeline for other trades that are coming in.
Yeah.
And remember, with a lump sum contract, the price was agreed up front. So any change like this involves a careful negotiation process.
To figure out how much more it's going to cost?
Exactly.
I bet those conversations get pretty detailed.
They can.
Trying to balance what the client wants with, the reality of construction.
Exactly.
Clear communication's got to be essential.
Oh, absolutely.
Everyone needs to be on the same page.
Yeah, everyone needs to understand the implications of the change.
Yeah.
Agree on how it's going to be valued and incorporated into the contract.
So it's all about teamwork, finding solutions.
Yeah.
Even when those curveballs come your way.
Absolutely. Now let's switch gears again and think about a project using an NEC contract.
Right.
Remember those compensation events we talked about?
Yeah, those legally sounding things?
Yeah, well, those unexpected ground conditions that we talked about earlier, they would most likely qualify as a compensation event under NEC.
Okay.
So instead of everyone scrambling to figure out, who's responsible and how do we adjust the contract, there's already a built-in mechanism for dealing with the specific situation.
I see.
So the contractor would submit a quotation outlining the cost impact of the change, and the project manager would assess it.
And hopefully they come to an agreement.
And it's all about early notification, collaboration, finding a fair solution that keeps the project moving forward.
So that proactive approach could save a lot of headaches down the line.
Absolutely. It's all about fostering a more collaborative environment.
Okay.
Now let's add another layer of complexity.
Okay.
Remember that contractor's designed portion we discussed?
Yeah, the two hats thing.
Yeah. So that can get even more interesting under NEC contracts.
Okay, remind me, what's the contractor's design portion again?
So it's the part of the project where the contractor is responsible for both the design and the construction.
Okay.
And this often happens with specialized elements.
Like a really complex facade or something.
Yeah. Or a unique structural element. Now imagine there's a change request within that contractor's design portion.
Okay.
So now it's not just about adjusting quantities or construction methods.
Right.
It's about potentially redesigning a key part of the project.
Right.
And that redesign could have ripple effects throughout the project.
Yeah.
It could impact material choices, structural loads, even the timeline for other trades. It's a real domino effect.
Wow.
And under NEC, managing those changes effectively requires clear communication, early warnings, and a real willingness to work together to find solutions.
So those NEC contracts, they really emphasize that proactive, collaborative spirit.
Absolutely.
So it really seems like each contract type has its own personality.
It does.
Its own way of approaching these situations.
Yeah.
But one thing that seems to be universal is the importance of communication.
Oh, absolutely.
And collaboration.
Yeah.
Working together.
It's crucial.
No matter what contract you're working with.
You got it.
Clear communication, early warnings about potential changes, and that willingness to find solutions together can really make all the difference.
Absolutely.
Speaking of, twists and turns in the road.
Yeah.
We haven't even talked about preliminaries.
Oh, yeah. Those sneaky little things.
I have a feeling that there's more to them than meets the eye.
Oh, there is. Preliminaries are kind of like the unsung heroes of a construction project. They're essential.
Yeah.
But often overlooked.
When it comes to valuing changes.
Exactly. Think about it. Any change to the project scope can have a ripple effect on those preliminary costs.
So give me some examples. What kind of costs are we talking about?
Okay, so we're talking about things like extending the hire period for equipment if the project gets delayed.
Okay.
Maybe a change requires additional site facilities, things like temporary offices, storage areas, even toilets.
Right.
Don't forget about essential safety measures.
Right.
If a change impacts the site layout or the type of work being done, you might need to adjust your safety protocols, which all adds to the cost.
So those indirect costs, they can really add up.
Yeah, it's like the hidden iceberg beneath the surface of the project.
Yeah, exactly.
And failing to account for those preliminaries when you're valuing changes can lead to budget overruns and a lot of headaches down the line.
Okay, so we've tackled the big contract types.
Yeah.
Explored some real-world scenarios. We've even uncovered this hidden world of preliminaries.
Right.
What other practical considerations should people be aware of when it comes to valuing changes?
Well, one thing that often trips people up is the concept of day works.
Okay.
So remember, day works are a way of valuing variations based on the actual time and resources used.
Right, so you just track everything really carefully.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's a really valuable tool when it's tough to price something up front.
Like what kinds of things?
Things like minor additions, emergency repairs, those things that just seem to pop up out of nowhere.
Right, so instead of trying to predict the unpredictable, you just really carefully track everything.
Exactly.
And then you use that information to figure out the cost.
Absolutely. But here's the catch.
Okay.
Accurate record keeping is absolutely crucial for day works.
Okay.
You need to track labor hours, materials used, any equipment involved.
So every little detail.
Every single detail.
Yeah.
Because without those detailed records, you're basically flying blind when it comes to valuing those variations.
So if you're using Dayworks, make sure you have a good system in place to track everything.
Meticulously.
Okay, any other words of wisdom as we wrap up this practical side of things?
Okay, so let's leave our listeners with a few key takeaways.
Right.
First, variations are inevitable.
Okay.
Construction is a dynamic process.
Yeah.
Things rarely go exactly according to plan.
So it's not about, preventing change altogether,
right,
but about having the tools to deal with it.
Exactly. Second, don't underestimate the ripple effect of variations.
Okay.
A seemingly small change can have cascading consequences.
That's like the butterfly effect.
Yeah.
One little flap of the wings can cause a storm.
Absolutely. And finally, remember that clear communication is so important.
Yeah.
Keep everyone in the loop.
Yeah.
Document everything meticulously and approach those changes with a collaborative spirit.
Great advice. It's been a really eye-opening journey.
It has.
Through the world of construction contract variations.
Yeah.
I feel like I've gained a whole new appreciation for what it takes to bring those blueprints to life.
Absolutely.
It's not just about bricks and mortar.
It's a lot more complicated than that.
There's this whole web of agreements and processes.
It's a complex world.
Yeah.
And it's one that's constantly evolving.
Right.
As the construction industry embraces new technologies, as it faces new challenges, the way we value changes, it's going to continue to adapt.
So as we wrap up, what's the one key takeaway you want our listener to walk away with?
Remember that change is inevitable in construction.
Okay.
But it doesn't have to be a source of conflict or chaos. By understanding the principles of valuing changes, by knowing the nuances of those different contract types, and by embracing that collaborative approach, we can navigate those changes effectively and deliver successful projects.
That's what we like to hear.
Yeah.
Well, it's been a fascinating journey, and I feel equipped to, tackle those contract challenges with a newfound confidence.
That's what we like to hear. Knowledge is power.
Yeah.
The more you understand about this complex world, the better prepared you'll be.
Well, thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
Yeah, thanks for listening.
Into the world of valuing changes in construction contracts.
It's been fun.
We hope you've enjoyed the journey and gained some valuable insights along the way. Until next time.